Hey guys, welcome back to Buster's Corner. We are on a conference call, Zoom meeting, if you will, Zoom meeting with Tom Hogue, going at this again. And Tom's got a new slideshow for us. Next Gen Diffuser tuning and testing. Can we tune the diffuser? Can we?
Well, that's what we're going to talk about. Yeah.
Right.
As you can
Right.
tell, I enjoy PowerPoints. I made a living on doing PowerPoints, so I figured I'm so quick at it, I'll
I like
do it
the
again.
car down there. That's pretty spiffy looking car. Nice paint job.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's the next gen there. Yep.
All right. Well, I'm going to clear out some cameras here. Let's
Okay.
get rid of me. And then we're going to get rid of you, put you right there. And you got the floor, Tom. Go, man, go.
Great. Last time we were running Talladega a couple weeks ago, right? And you had set up a pretty good car for that track, and so I started playing with. I spent some time playing with the car where I set up the front springs at 4,500 pounds, maxed them out, and then the idea was that I would keep lowering those rear springs until I could get that car to just squat and just sit down nice and tight to the track all the way around the track and get really fast. And what I found was I got all the way down to 400-pound springs in the rear, and boy, that car got super slow. And I said, okay, that's interesting. We don't have bump stops like the Gen 6 had, and well, okay, so just I said, okay, here's a problem. I got to dig deep, and so this PowerPoint presentation is a result of me just digging deep to understand what was going on, and it turned out it was all about that diffuser, right? So that's what this is about. Once again, I'm no association, Iracing, NASCAR, TotalSim. I'm just some guy playing the game, right? So we're gonna do a quick touch on the next gen car, right? Everybody knows about that. We're going to talk about the next NASCAR next gen diffuser. And this is really what this presentation is about. We're going to go through some diffuser basics and airflows. We're going to look at some diffuser testing that I did in MoTec and a little summary and a garage worksheet that you're going to like. And so I actually have updated the MoTec workbook and it's out there. And so for those people that want to just download that workbook, you probably won't understand what those pages are about without watching this video. So it's kind of a nice thing to do here. All right, so by now, everybody in the game that's been driving the next gens knows a lot of these features, right? We got the rear diffuser in the back. We got the raised center on the front splitter, which is different from the Gen 6, right? And we're going to talk about that. And then also we have the side profiles that they've changed. And yeah, we have the exhaust pipes such coming out of there, the venting. But what's important to notice is they don't seal like they did on the Gen 6. And we're going to talk about that and why. Right, so here's the rear diffuser in the back. The diffuser is key to downforce. It is everything about downforce, and downforce is the key to fast laps, right? So as people know, you put a rake in that car, and the car seems to work better, but gosh, doesn't that increase drag? What about drag, right? We're going to answer some questions on that too. So on my journey, I got into this randomly, but I finally came across Dr. Eric Jacuzzi. He's the senior director of aerodynamics at NASCAR R&D, and he's got some great videos out there where he is in charge, right, of the R&D of aerodynamic efforts. He develops these solutions using the CFD, which is the computational fluid dynamics. Wind tunnel track testing safety is essentially a virtual wind tunnel, right? And so him and his team are the ones that actually built that diffuser. And so once again, right, just like I did on the shock video, I like to build a foundation based on reality of what's going on in the cars, because when we do it like this, I believe that we can learn enough, build our knowledge base, right, such that as iRacing starts to change their modeling and evolve their game, they should be most likely they will be evolving towards the direction NASCAR is going, right? And so as long as I'm in sync with where NASCAR is going, then I might be early for what iRacing is doing, but at least I'm on the path to where there'll be a convergence. Right? So that's what I like to do in this, right? let's build a foundation based on reality here. All right, so out of his presentation, it's a great short presentation. I even gave you the YouTube link here if you want to find it. So he focuses on 3 forces: drag, lift, or down force in our case, and side force, otherwise known as yaw moment. So this slide that he had in his presentation really, if you will, open my eyes, right? So when it comes to drag, for powerful cars or tracks with significant percent of cornering, drag is not important. Drag, he doesn't really care about drag, right? Which is interesting. But when it comes to downforce, consistency of downforce with the ride height pitch changes are very important. To him, downforce is everything. You get downforce, you get fast. And what's also interesting is the side force yaw moment. He said it's difficult to quantify in simulations. So why that becomes interesting is how we see iRacing, if you will, modeling some of the side drafting and such in the cars. And I would suspect we'll see a lot of evolution on that as that gets better, right? So this is a big deal here, right? In summary, ignore the drag when it comes to those cars and focus on the downforce, right? So that makes it easy. We get to focus on one thing to get those cars faster. Now, here's the actual diffuser on these cars, right? Like I said, I like to get a touch of reality. And in fact, they even put a rear flap on this diffuser so that when the car gets spun around, the car doesn't take off. And they put a lot of time and an effort into making that flap where it can actually drop. They did a lot of wind tunnel testing. So why this is interesting is next time you get rolled over in one of those races, do a replay on your rollover and see if that flap is dropping, or even if you get spun around, take a look and see if if Iracing has actually put that on the car. That'd be fun to find out. I haven't done that yet. Okay, so when it comes to the to Dr. Jacuzzi's teams and their modeling, right? He talked about using the computational fluid dynamics, the CFD. They think of that as a virtual wind tunnel. They do a scale wind tunnels, they do full size wind tunnels, and they do track testing. But when it comes to us, right? So if we take a look at what's relevant to us, the only option that we have here, right, is, if you will, in this grid is the computational fluid dynamics, the virtual wind tunnel, obviously, because we don't have a car. Why that's important and why I'm calling that out is there's a lot of great content on the internet here that I found, and I've gone through a lot of it, and I've digested it and put it in this presentation to make it simpler. But when you go and take a look and find that content out there, then you can have confidence that actually, since NASCAR has been using this technology, that some of that technology will flow through into the game. Now, just to verify that's in fact the case, right? So what I did find is, in fact, iRacing absolutely is looking at CFD modeling, right? They've even engaged with a company called TotalSim to get some of the modeling feedback, and so they can put that into the game, right? And there's even a really cool simulation of the TotalSims they put up there up on the YouTube. So where this is cool is, right, so as we're looking in this technology, NASCAR is using TotalSim, the company, so is iRacing, so everything starts to come together. Okay, now we can have solid confidence that what we're working on here is based in reality, and making sure that the information and the content is flown into the game as well, right? So it's not just Tom's crazy ideas. Okay, so I've gone through a lot of these white papers, and I've distilled the diffuser into a simple model so it's easy to understand what's going on. Okay. Now, in its simplest form, right? What we have is if you will, a tunnel, an air tunnel, where we have airflow coming into the tunnel, right? And then we have air going over the tunnel. As that air enters that tunnel, that velocity increases. Now, Bernoulli says that when you have a fluids that velocity is increased, in order for that velocity to increase, there has to also result in a low pressure, if you will, right? So that the low pressure is relative to the pressure that's above it, if you will, surrounding it. And when you have a high pressure and a low pressure condition going on, high pressure will always go towards a low pressure when that creates downforce. Now, after this tunnel here, we have a diffuser, and what that diffuser does is it allows that air pressure to normalize, right? So that we stop getting all that turbulent air behind it. So that would be the diffuser part. So if you will, the green rectangular part will be, if you will, underneath the car. What is critical here is to understand that when we work to get that high velocity, low pressure condition, we're literally creating a vacuum, and more vacuum is downforce. So that diffuser is allowing that car to not just get pressed down to the track, but it's allowing it to get sucked down to the track. It's a big deal if we get this thing operating correctly, right? And like Dr. Jacuzzi said, downforce is speed through those corners, right? That's everything. Okay, so that now for a lot of you carburetor folks, right, in the old days where you had carburetors, okay, so just to give a little perspective here, we all know that if you went up to a carburetor while the engine's running and you put your hand over that carburetor, you're going to block the air and that engine's going to die. Think of it like that. If you block that airflow, that vacuum that you created is going to die. It's as simple as that. Okay. So hopefully you like my little car drawings, right? So if you had a car without a splitter, spoiler, diffuser, simply the air flows, we get a higher pressure over the top, right? We would have some air flowing underneath the car, but because that car is so exposed, right, it doesn't have an under tray, you get turbulent airflow, and all you get is nasty air coming off the back of the car. It occurs what's called air separation, and that causes drag, right? So you get no real downforce onto the car, pushing the car down, and you get a lot of drag from the tail. So you get neither downforce and a lot of drag. Now, here's one of those CFD modeling pictures of that airflow under the car. You can see at the rear of the car all that nasty air in the back, right? So that gives you a little perspective of what that CFD modeling starts to look like for a typical car. So now let's take a look at what that Gen 6 car would have looked like, right? Where we had the little front splitter put on, we got the little rear spoiler put on. And remember what we're doing is we were sealing that front splitter off. In fact, we're also even trying to seal off the sides. So we had no air going under there, right? So we had little to no air flow underneath, which gave us little to no pressure, right? So yeah, we had some downforce, and then so what we're doing is we're looking to keep all that down, get as much downforce from the pressure from the air above, but we were not getting into a condition where we're sucking that car to the track, right? So yeah, and then we'd reduce some drag because we kept air from underneath. The ugly underneath the car was we didn't have the nice clean tray like we do on the NextGen cars, right? So yeah, you would get some downforce, but not as good as what you'd want, right? And so, and then that bubble here in the back, you would see that bubble in that typical Gen 6 car, right? Where you had the big bubble, and we knew about those bubbles as we'd go on to Talladega, right? Because we would try and get our nose within that big bubble space. But you can see how that air is still pretty nasty out the back, right? So now when we go to the rear diffuser with airflow, right? Now with that front splitter, we want to keep that front splitter off the ground so that we can allow that airflow to go underneath the car, and we manage that high velocity. And when you start to get that low pressure built up, and then now we start to create that vacuum that we wanted, and then coming off the back, that diffuser allows that air to slowly normalize in pressure, and we get the nice airflows off the back of that car, right? So the bigger the difference in high and low pressure, the higher the downforce. So what we're managing here is, can we manage the airflow underneath the car better such that we can get an optimal high velocity, low pressure condition to get maximum downforce out of the car, right? And now in another one of these little CFD models, if you will, right? We can see where the top car model has where we have the larger wake off the tail of that car, right? With no diffuser, high velocity in the front. But if you notice here with the diffuser case, we got a higher velocity extending through the entire range of the car, right? It's more in the yellow tint, and then it starts to normalize again as that diffuser starts to go green, slow down, and then we get to a blue condition where now we have a smaller wake. Now, why this is important with this smaller wake, right? A couple things to think about here, and that is when we're playing at Talladega and Daytona, we got to get that nose closer, right? So something to also think about is next time we go back and you guys are testing on that car, you might want to test about having the nose a little bit higher than you might think, because as you allow this air to come off the tail of this car, you want it to enter the front of the car. You want the air to enter the nose of your car a little bit more efficiently and lock you in a little bit tighter on those on your drafting lines, right? And so you might want to play with that as you think about how you manage the air coming off that rear diffuser of the car in front of you. Okay, so we have basically established how the airflow looks like, right? And we talked about a little bit already about that Gen 6 Optimum Draft, and then how you might think about how your car managing a smaller bubble here off the back of the lead car, and how you might want your the air from the lead car to enter your front splitter to maximize the draft for your car as you're tailing it, right? So, sorry, I jumped over that pretty quick, but once again, just to think about how you might get a better lock-in on that and the big train in Talladega and Daytona's on those big super speedways. So, another view here of that of the NextGen car is how we have the tight underbody tray, if you will, and it creates those efficient streamlines. Something here that I really wanted to call out here is think about, as we have these airflows coming across the nose of this car, right, and going under the car, you also have the air coming in through the back tire. And that back tire airflow is going to feed that rear diffuser. And so it's a different way to think about that. Now, where this gets to be important here is when you think about side drafting, right? And here's some Gen 6 cars drafting in. And if you look at the top picture here, you'll notice that the airflow, when there's a side draft that occurs, that airflow comes around the nose, and that lead car loses downforce. And without the downforce, and what he's dealing with is he gets an increased drag, right, from this side drafting car as they come up to their tire. Well, you also want to think about how that side drafting car is also going to be taking a lot of your airflow that's feeding that diffuser off that rear tire, and it's going to kill your downforce as well. So if you remember when we were driving at Talladega, everybody keeps saying, guys, we're playing follow the leader, we're playing follow the leader. And some guys were successful. They would get an outside line draft going, right? Well, a lot of the drivers couldn't team up and get that going. And I suspect a lot of the reasons why is because what they were doing was they were struggling with how to protect their own airflows around the side of their cars that it's feeding the undercar diffuser. So I suspect you might want to try next time to make sure you have enough spacing between. If you're going to run the outside, you want to watch how close you are to the wall, and you also want to watch how close you are to the inside line. And I think what you'll find is there's a tighter range of optimal place on the track. You can have that second line be effective at getting a second line to run. Right? We just saw that where people just struggled with that. So anyways, just a little food for thought as we've been looking at these airflows here. Okay, so now we know how to get the diffuser, what it takes to keep that diffuser working, right? So how do we put it to work? So this is where one morning I woke up thinking, okay, so what if we start doing a deeper dive into what's going on underneath the car, right? How do we get visibility into that, into the factors that control that airflow? How do we make sure we have airflow? So what I did is I visualized, okay, so we have, if you will, this little wedge block here underneath that would represent all the air volume underneath the car. And so here you'd have the front ride height here in this little line, vertical line here, and then the other vertical line here would represent your rear ride height, and then the slope would represent a rake. And I said, well, what if we were able to manage or take a look at the volume that this space represents, and then we can start to put that into MoTec. This way we can kind of get a different perspective. Now remember, in MoTec today, my MoTec workbooks have front ride height, we have rake, we have rear ride height, right? But I wanted to take those elements and give us a different perspective so we can kind of have a view of the diffuser. So here's the crazy calculation I came up with, right? So in order to calculate that volume, what I had to do is split those up into two segments, right? And I called this, the base here, a diffuser base, the dark blue, which is dictated by the front ride height. And it's a straight line back. And then what I'm calling the diffuser wedge would capture the rake and the remaining ride height. And together, if I can calculate the volumes separately together. And when I add those two, I get the total volume. So now I have two components, right? Three new things we're going to call it, right? We have the diffuser base volume, we have the diffuser wedge volume, then we have the total volume, which is those two combined, okay? So doing those calculations, sure enough, now I've produced a new MoTec page. And by the way, once again, I've just uploaded this MoTec, new updated MoTec version 7.1. It has this page in here. And so what you can see is where now we have the top row. I don't know, hopefully you can see these. I tried to change the colors so you can see them better. We have ground speed, right, to give you a little reference there. My NextGen downforce curve. We have the front center ride height, which is where I'm finding the center line of the front. And then I have the rear center. Those are the lines that I'm basing these calculations off of. And we have the smooth diffuser volume, which is, this is where it cleans up. It doesn't take as many samples, so you get a smoother line, but it represents still that overall diffuser volume. And then I have the diffuser base volume and the wedge volume, and then a smooth center rake here. Okay, so the idea here is, once again, you can get these views, right, by taking apart the ride heights and the rakes, but this gives us a view of what's going on in that fuel, our diffuser underneath the car, what's feeding that diffuser. What we're looking to do is what we're looking for is to see if we are actually choking off that diffuser, right? Because once again, if we block that airflow, we get no high velocity, we get no low pressure, we get no vacuum, right? So we got to make sure we're managing these a little better. All right, so now we got a MoTec page. Now what do we do with it, right? Once again, we, like I said, make sure we're not driving those to zero. Here's a case where I'm showing it down to, it's just dipping into below the zero, but overall the average is about 2.96 for the base volume. All right, so like I usually do, I'd like to put these things to test, see if I can validate some of my assumptions. So what I did was I created a test here where the idea was to keep the rake constant and adjust the ride height so that we can optimize the diffuser base volume, right? And measure that over an average by taking an average of 3 laps. After you optimize that base volume, then we want to go and see if we can optimize the wedge volume, and once again take some laps, leaving the base the same, which is dictated by that front ride height, and take an average of 3 laps. And I did the test at Texas, which was a nice medium track. Wasn't quite a super speedway, but it wasn't a short one like Rockingham. And then, like I said, the lap times and speeds were taken from laps 2 to 4, so we can let the first lap where the car settles down. So here I have the first test again. Is I did a series of tests, right? And you didn't want to see all of them because you'd find it boring if I rattle through every test case, right? But there's several. And so this is the case where I had the slowest. I took the worst case scenario on where I was tuning the base volume, and I had starting ride heights. So I went from in the front. Remember, I'm raising the, in this case, just to be clear, okay, I'm keeping the rake angle constant. What I'm doing is I'm raising the car all four corners, 4 clicks at a time, if you will, right? And then making sure that I'm keeping my if you will, the cross weights the same, make sure that everything's coming up even, if you will, equally. So I started at front where is about just over 3/4 inch, 0.76 inches, rear is 1.59. And through the testing, raising 4 clicks at a time, I got to where the front was 1.64 and the rear was 2.48. And if you can see here where in the diffuser base volume, where I, as well as with the front, I'm just burying, right? I'm just completely pinching off my base volume area, right? Although my total volume for that is still above 0, right? And then, and even on the wedge volume, I'm still above 0, which is, that looks good, right? So in this case, I'm closing off the base. And so this was one of the slowest 3 average laps. And then as I went through, here I'm highlighting the fastest lap that I found when I was tuning the base. You can see where now I got on the base on the yellow line here, base volume. Yeah, while it was dipping in below the 0, it was still average about 3.07 cubic feet. And so, you know, it's not a big space underneath the car, right? And so, and then the wedge was still staying pretty constant, if you will. So here you can see where it just started clearing on the base volume, and then that's where I started picking up my faster lap, right? So I plotted that data out in a curve, and you can see where I went from, my worst case scenario was 30, it was 30.800 of a lap time on average. And you can see what was interesting here is how I got a plateau of my fast lap time. So somewhere in the middle here, I found where it was an optimal time. So that was really cool to where you can see where just adjusting the base, I had a wide plateau of a pretty acceptable lap times, right? So then, okay, so now I picked out the best one. Okay, now I got an optimal base. Let's see if what happens when I start to optimize the wedge, right? Which basically is where I'm keeping the base volume, the front ride height right at 1.13 inches, which is where it was optimal, right? And then which keeps my base volume at 4.8 cubic feet. Now I'm just going to be adjusting the rear heights, and I went from 1.56 to 2.36 inches. And that took my rake from 0.52 inches to 1.32 inches. And that's as measured with my dashboard, which is just a straight garage calculation on the rake angle, right? So now what we'd see here is that if you take a look at my wedge here in my worst lap, you can see once again, now I'm burying the rear ride heights, right? And I am, and then of course that wedge volume is getting destroyed. It's dropping way below 0, the 0 line. It's just all over the 0, right? And yet once again, my overall total volume is good. And so that's why I kind of like being able to where you want to make sure you can see both these two components, right? When I started this project, I just assumed that as long as we had a good volume for the diffuser, like the total volume, it should be good, right? So then I end up doing a bunch of tests again, right? Going through those ranges, and I end up finding a better lap time than I had before, right? And so now, if you look at the wedge volume, right? Yeah, there's a peak over here where I dropped to minus 0.49, but for the most part, that wedge volume is staying above 0, right? And now I got a nice looking base volume on my for my volume on the diffuser there, and then my total volume is now up, averaging about 5.07. And so then if you take a look, okay, so if you take a look at my lap times, sure enough, I was able to find out a peak here, right? A sharp peak, which is a little harder to find, which actually caught my attention here. I thought that was pretty cool, right? So now I'm starting to see where, hey, well, maybe I am sitting here tuning this diffuser, making improvements here. So now this slide here, if I plot out, I already showed you the base volume curve, right? And then I showed you the wedge volume curve. But now what you can see is I actually significantly lowered my lap times by going through the process where I tuned the base and then I tuned the wedge, and that was a significant improvement, right? Almost 400 thousandths of a second faster by going through the process of tuning the diffuser. So that's where, having the right tools and taking a new perspective of it gives a new insight to how we got to manage that diffuser and how we get benefits from it. But so there's still questions, right? So one of the problems I was having was, did the rake, raising the rake, right? Was that more of a roll center gain, right? Kind of like we used to use with track bars, right? Did that have an influence on our test results? And maybe it did, right? It's tough to isolate that because I don't have the tools yet for that. Should we have seen a larger gain in those lap times if we got a massive vacuum sucking the car down to the track, right? Maybe that is all we're going to get. We did get some gains. I would argue that what we did here, it did prove beneficial. And then we just don't know how much of this modeling has Iracing put into the next gen car and the diffuser, right? This could be just some Tom crazy idea, and maybe we're just grasping at straws. But it's still been fun either way, learning about the diffusers and how they got to work. So, and why I'm bringing that up is that eventually, if Iracing is not there yet, I would expect that they would eventually get there, right? And so all this knowledge and all the tools that I've put into these MoTec books will still be valid, just maybe we're just a little early, right? And then when it comes to that roll center and center of gravity, right? I did come up with a new page to start to give people a view into that, right? And so this is where my new garage page comes into play. So one of the things I found with MoTec that drives me crazy is every time I do a change and I find it, okay, all of a sudden I found a good fast lap time I saw in MoTec, and then I go off and I make some more clicks and then I come back, oh great. Now I went from slow to fast, now I'm back to slow. What was that change I made? So this page here captures the static config of the car out of the garage, right? So I bring those forward into a page. And so here, if you start on the right-hand side, you'll see all the shock values, shock settings. And by the way, these settings here are actually in the new version 7. I didn't show you. You've probably seen those in Bob's latest videos, but these values here are also put into the suspension histogram page, so it's easier for you to recognize or remember what you're doing with the shocks, right? So we have the front brake bias, we have the springs and the collar heights, and we have the caster settings and camber settings, and then over here I have my center of gravity scatter diagram, right? So what I've done is I've been able to estimate pretty closely, and these will be pretty good measurements on your front to rear center of gravity, left to right center of gravity. And you see the X here, there's a crosshair. So the center of the car is at 0, 0. So this X crosshair is showing you where your center of gravity is in relation to the center of the car. Center of gravity of height. Okay. What I did with that one is, because the old school rule was that your center of gravity height-wise for the car will be the height of the camshaft. And then what you would want to do is figure out how high you are from the ground and the frame, well, from the frame rails, right? So what I did was I went out into my garage. I have a Corvette in the garage. I took out the measuring ruler and said, yeah, sure enough, it's still about 15. So I did an estimate on where that center of gravity height is. Why this will be useful is because it'll still give you a good baseline reference and relative from when you make changes, right? It becomes a relative rating of what you're doing. It may not necessarily be 100% accurate where that center of gravity of height is for these cars, but it's a good starting point until we can get more data from Iracing to make it a little more accurate. All right, so that was that journey that I took here on the diffuser. And here's a few resources that I cited into this presentation. A lot of people have put out some really great content. There's more out there that if you want to go start taking a look for CFD on these cars and drafting, side drafting, got some really great stuff that would be a whole nother level of presentation than what I did here. So hopefully you find this interesting. And so that's a wrap for me and what I've been doing for the last couple weeks here. Hopefully it helps.
All right, let's see. Yeah, no, that's all good stuff there. Let me see here. Let me move these pictures around here so we can. There we go. No, yeah, I didn't sleep at all through any of that, Tom. I swear to God, I didn't.
I bet you didn't. Yeah.
But
Exactly.
I'll tell you what, I'm gonna watch this again, and I'm gonna get a bottle of tequila out, and every time you say right, it's a shot.
There you go. Right.
All right.
Right. It's a shot. Yeah.
It's just more fun that way.
Well, I was gonna tell some joke about jacuzzis and foam and other
CFD.
stuff, but
That's where that CFD joke came in. All right.
Yeah. So I mean, I just find it humorous, right? So digging into this, we got a jacuzzi in the story. We got a foam party, if you will, open foam. That is this, and then CFD sounds a little bit like CBD, and then it ends up being a rear joke that I didn't want to go to.
You just did it anyway. What's the punchline?
I would
you
never
did
do
the
that.
whole joke. You might as well throw the punchline.
I said I thought about it, but I wasn't going to do it.
Okay.
Gosh, that would definitely be a drinking joke right there.
The first thing I got to do is I got to go out and roll my car over. Right? Where's that short little track with the poles in the middle of it that you hit and rolls your car over?
But Matt Holden, he rolled the car over to see if he saved that replay.
I know. I remember that track. It's a little short quarter-mile track, and it's got telephone poles in the middle. You hit that pole, and it rolls your car over.
Oh my God! I had fun with that track. That was the best part about that track, was launching that tour modified, doing barrel rolls over the track.
Too funny. So. Let's hit the flash.
All right. So
I had another note here.
That diffuser is a new piece of equipment. So one thing that I just want to stress again is pay attention. I think you need to protect the airflows around your driver's door as well with these next-gen cars. Maybe that's assuming that Iracing put all the modeling in there, and I bet you Iracing has put a lot of that airflow modeling into the game already, because they're all using that OpenFoam and TotalSim, and they have all the resources to do that. So
yeah, somebody was asking the other day, how important is it, with the rake angle in the back and raising the back up, and what does that do for you? And I had mentioned it to him that I like to use it as a track bar if I need a minor adjustment to loosen me up. So I am concerned, and it's going to take more practice on my side. You raise the car up, you're loosening the car up. You're really going to free the car up. What happens on the long run, 20 laps in, and you drop the fuel, and now your rear end is so high. So, but I think, as I'm watching this video, I'm thinking, okay, I need to establish that, everything you just established, then run the 20 laps. And then if it gets loose, I need to adjust the car, maybe put more cross weight into it for the long run, maybe change the spring for the long run to reduce the looseness from losing the fuel in the long run. Would you concur, Doctor? I mean, you got to set the wedge and all that stuff. You got to get the diffuser working.
You got to get the now. Here you go. I mean, so the whole thing is this is what makes doing setup so hard, is that where do you want that diffuser to be optimized? How much range does it have? Obviously, what I did prove is there is a range to it, because I got faster. I went slower to faster and then slower again. So then the question is, which lap do you want that diffuser to be optimized?
Yeah, when do you want to use it?
Can I get it on lap 25? Right. So we could really use it when those tires start to wear down a little bit and force some more traction out of them, right? Force some more grip, right? So I'd probably argue maybe you want it a little bit later in the run than you want it early, right? But then if you get it too low, then yeah, you're going to tighten up that car. Yeah. So no, it's not easy to do setups. I can just tell you where your problems are at, and then you get to go work it out.
There you go, doctor. You got a broken arm. I don't know what you're gonna do about it, but you got one.
Yeah, you got one.
You got one.
Make you feel better.
I know what you got. I just can't tell you how to fix it. Too funny. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, good stuff. You got anything else to throw in here, or are we done here?
Nope. I think we're done for now.
Okay, guys. Thanks for watching Buster's Corner on YouTube. This is all about the diffuser. Tom Hogue's your speaker today. We'll put links down below. Do you have links for us put down below? Probably so. We got stuff down below. Subscribe. You need to subscribe so you can follow the video. So if there's any updates to the video, you'll get notified that they're there. If you don't subscribe, then you gotta come back and check every now and then. You can find us on Facebook, Buster's Corner. We have a Discord channel. If you want to join the Discord, either go through the Facebook link or send me an email message here on the YouTube channel, and I'll send you a link to the Discord if you want to join that. That's all I got. Okay, bye guys. Say hi to Tom, Bill, and Bob on the racetrack. Happy race day. Bye-bye.